I'm here at the Civic Center, and when I first moved to Brea in 1983, the old Brea Olinda High School was back there across the street on Birch. But 6 years later, the brand new high school was built up on the hill, and the old high school was completely gone. Well, almost completely gone, and that almost is what I want to talk to you about today. But first we need to go way back in time to 1910, to the construction of the Randolph School, which was one of the first two buildings built in town and was located right near the corner of today's Brea Boulevard and Lambert. Because in 1910 there were so few children in the area, the school only had 4 classrooms, 2 on the first floor and 2 below. But they filled up really quickly a year later when the new little town of Randolph changed its name to Brea, and the first big influx of people decided to make their home here. So what happened to the school? Well, a second building, a 1-story addition, was added about 1912. But that didn't solve the problem though. So 4 years later, the Randolph School was finally abandoned, and the big new Brea Grammar School, today's junior high, was built across the street in 1916, giving the district plenty of new space for the growing student population. Okay, problem 1 solved, but there was a problem 2, and that was that we had no high school here of our own. Instead, our students had to go over the hills to Fullerton High School, and this caused a lot of grumbling here in town. So much grumbling, in fact, that in 1925, the Brea Olinda School Board decided to keep our students here and build a $325,000 campus on Birch Street. Okay, but where were our students going to go to school in the meantime? Remember that add-on building at the abandoned Randolph School? Well, it was moved over to the grammar school and set up as a temporary high school. For 2 years it served that purpose with a small staff of teachers and a principal, plus a student body that luckily didn't crowd the little building too much. In the meantime, the cornerstone for the new high school had been laid in 1926, and those 2-story walls rose on Birch Street in what was once a barley field. By 1927, the work on the main building was finally done, allowing 21 students the following June to be the first graduates of the new Brea Olinda High School. So now we get to that almost gone part of the story I told you about earlier. In America in the 1920s, men went out to work to support their families with an occasional break, but women were expected to stay home and, among other things, wash, clean, cook, and sew. They needed to do them well too, and the high schools helped out. And Brea Olinda was no different than anybody else, except we did something here that no other district did. We actually built a real house called the Practice House to train our future homemakers. Yep, remember that same old Randolph School addition / temporary high school building at the grammar school? It was carefully taken apart, and using the lumber and whatever else could be salvaged, the Practice House was built, along with the second house on campus for the school's head custodian and his family. Well, where did the furniture for the Practice House come from? Well, the boys in the woodworking class made it. At least we know they made the beds. And the girls? They made the curtains and helped in the decorating. And speaking of girls, each week a different group of up to 6 of them would spend 4 days and nights in the house, learning how to clean a house properly and not so properly, plan meals for a family, actually cook those meals for each other, learn to set and decorate a table correctly, entertain faculty members 1 night a week, and then their own boyfriends on another night. In 1933, though, the house became too small. So an add-on was designed by the boys in the carpentry class, and those same boys did the actual construction work. Even during the time in the mid-1930s when the high school was getting a required major facelift due to the big Long Beach earthquake of 1933, the Practice House kept on graduating girls, and this went on to the early 1960s when co-ed vocational training started and the stereotyping ended that sent boys to wood, mechanical, and auto shop, and the girls to homemaking classes. The little office didn't disappear though. Instead, it became a classroom, a teacher's lounge, a counseling office, a preschool care office, as well as a place just to store books. It was even a real honest-to-goodness home in the 1940s when newly hired principal Frank Hopkins moved in with his family when he couldn't find a house to rent or buy in Brea. In the late 80s, when it was decided to replace the old high school with the new, and make room for the new Brea Marketplace Shopping Center, the city's historical committee asked that the home be saved since it was unique in Orange County. Then, in 1989, just before the wrecking ball was about to begin the final demolition of old Brea Olinda High School, and people looking across from the Civic Center saw the school for the last time, a short video appeared on our own Video Brea line showing both the outside and the inside of the home. It didn't look all that great at that time after all those years of different uses, but you could still get an idea of what a special place it must have been for the 30 years it served as the practice house. Sitting amid the rubble and with just the main building to keep it company, the little house continued its wait to be moved somewhere to a permanent home. There was talk of placing it at the junior high, the new high school, Laurel School, Aravista School, on Unocal property, in Old City Hall Park, and possibly in a city historical park. Until that happened though, the house was temporarily placed on Flower Avenue and then moved not all that far away to Redwood. In 1994 though, with the help of a big truck and a very strong trailer, it made its way down the middle of Redwood to its permanent location on Laurel between Birch and Imperial. Here it was carefully restored and updated, and as you can see back there behind me, they did a terrific job of turning it back into the way it once looked. A year later, in 1995, there was a tour of the newly restored house attended by several city officials and a lot of other interested people, as well as a short ceremony and a plaque unveiling placing the practice house on the city's Historic Resources Register. It's been a long journey and a lot of moving around for the practice house ever since it was that old 1912 add-on at Randolph School, but it looks like it's finally found a permanent home. And I hope you'll agree with me that it was certainly a building worth saving. So for this Did You Know segment of Video Brea Line, I'm Brian Saul.